let's dive into how broad actually works. Now, you've heard me say this a lot. Broad is the best audience on Facebook, and that is objectively true. There is no data-based argument to say that lookalikes or intra-troops are better. And I know you might be saying, well, my ROAS is better on this or that, but that doesn't matter. ROAS is a nonsense metric that has no bearing on success in your business, because ultimately it's an out of context, inactionable number. And if you're paying extra to reduce the scale and scope of your business, are you really doing anything that's good? And we're going to dive into why this isn't an opinion, but objectively a mathematical certainty and a proven fact. And you don't just have to take my word for it, because we're going to back into the engineering and Facebook's business model. And ultimately, remember, ads do the targeting. Audiences don't. Audiences are a restriction on where the ads can actually be shown. So every time you're using a targeting audience, you're just making success more difficult. So first we have to establish what is broad. Now, broad, very simply, is age, gender, and location. It's not a certain audience size. It's not a stack that gives you enough value or options. Broad is very simply, what is the level of specificity that I can give the system that doesn't cost me extra? Because remember, every lookalike audience, every interest group, every retargeting audience, these come at premium costs. That inventory is smaller and more expensive. You are paying extra to customize where your ads are being shown. This is a tax. And back in the day, Facebook used to literally show you what the tax per audience was. So we're not going to pay extra to limit the success that we can achieve. So what are the three most important facts around broad? Again, facts, objective truths, not opinions, around broad targeting. Well, the first one is, it is the absolute cheapest cost of inventory on the platform. You literally can't get an audience that's cheaper than broad, because literally every audience starts at what broad costs you and then costs extra. So you might see better results or cheaper, whatever. That's the output of your ads based on how they are modifying the cost of your inventory. But at the end of the day, unit-based price is what broad costs. Also, ads do the targeting. That's an objective fact. Audiences don't do targeting. And lastly, broad is the most stable and scalable solution because it presents the least amount of restriction to the audiences that the ads want to reach. Now, let's set the table with some very hard facts. Inexplicable truths that we need to establish to understand why broad is so much better than everything else. Number one, Facebook knows what type of content you want to see. That's their entire business model. Their entire tech stack, going back 15 years, is built very much on understanding trillions of data points per user to know what they want to see. They also know what you're shopping for, because they have every electronic purchase information in your entire life. And they know when and why and where you're shopping, both online and in real life. They also know basically every single website you've ever been to. And most importantly, they know when you leave and when you come back. And all of that really, really matters in ads. Now, this might come across as a hot take, but Facebook is a machine learning platform. That shouldn't be too ridiculous. But honestly, more often than not, it is. So let's understand what that means. One, we have to respect the learning phase, because that's Facebook's way of saying whether or not they know what ads work and what ads won't. But that's really only half the data. Actually, it's a lot less than that. Because Facebook knows who to show your content to. And because it knows who to show your content to and where that can deliver your goals, ultimately, every ad ultimately sits on top of an entire database going over trillions of data points against billions of users to understand trend analysis, to ultimately know who to target, because that ad itself is developing its own audience. Every ad creates their own audience. When you use broad, you don't get in the way of that. Let's dive into an example here. Let's say you have a bakery. Now, you might say, well, I'm only going to target people with interest group bread. Okay, so we've dramatically cut down our entire universe to just these people that are in interest group bread because somebody told you that actually means anything of value, which they were objectively wrong. Now, let me ask you this. If somebody doesn't buy bread or eat bread, why would Facebook show them that ad? That would ultimately be a liability to Facebook's business model, which is bad for their business objectives. Why would Facebook take your money to create a bad experience for their users, ultimately to give you a higher cost and hurt their bottom line? There's literally no good argument to justify that other than you put in interest group bread and you're forcing spend, which is a liability to both you and to Facebook. Now, the honest truth is, once again, hot take, every ad makes its own lookalike audience. It's 100% true. So let me explain this in a certain way. If you show your ad to 1,000 people and 500 people like it and 500 people don't like it, who do you think is going to see the ad over the next 1,000 impressions? Is it going to be the people that didn't like it? Or is Facebook going to say, wow, these 500 people really responded well. I'm going to show this ad to people that look like those 500 people. Is it going to focus on a look-like audience? Focus to look a lot alike those who respond positively? Maybe your objective is to try to drive a business result. Would it not show that ad to people that are going to respond positively to the content and are likely to drive that business result? Is there any legitimate argument to say that Facebook ads don't make their own lookalike audience? No. Now, something we have to establish here is that all content is shown to people who want to see it. That's how organic and paid works. And the cost of your ad is directly related to how well you're meeting that need. Do people actually want to see your content? If so, you pay less. Your job is to make content that people want to see that ultimately drive deliverable results for your business that are desirable and projectable. If you're not getting a good enough result with your ads and you're running at broad, the problem is the creative. If you start running interest groups and bidding models and lookalikes and all this other stuff, there's 1,000 other problems that you need to solve for before you even get to the ad. And ultimately, the ad's the only thing you need to solve for at all anyway. So remember that. And again, another reason why you only need broad. So let's say you're using targeting audiences and interest groups, which, by the way, are getting removed by the thousands on a regular basis. And that's not Facebook trying to make things harder for you. It's forcing you to be a better business partner to Facebook, which is ultimately forcing you to do a better job. Remember, if your results on Facebook aren't desirable, that's your fault. And the way you fix that is by making better ads. Because remember, every ad is making its own lookalike audience. Again, fact, not up for debate, confirmed by the product and the engineering team. Moving forward, when we start to use a targeting audience, basically you're saying, I know that this ad has a very specific group of people that it wants to target, but instead of letting it go to where it's going to be received positively, I want to force it onto these other folks. Now, there's going to be some crossover in that Venn diagram of those two environments, but once you run out of that, your ad is a liability to your success, which means you pay more for worse results. And that's not good for business. So let's summarize here. How does broad actually work? Well, it brings you the cheapest audience that's most scalable, that aligns you most algorithmically with how Facebook works, allowing you to maximize the value of your greatest asset, your content, to push forward the simplest business objectives that are easily trackable without being inhibited. And that works for every single niche, every single business objective, and every single vertical, because ultimately you're using the system in the way that it was designed to be used. No audience is going to make any of those facts false. Until Facebook, and ultimately any optimized CPM environment, functionally changes the way it works, using the tools in the way they were designed to give you the best unit value for your market economics, to give you the greatest opportunity for growth and scale and stability and success, is ultimately the path you should probably be taking.